Siddhartha by Herman Hesse. Chapter 6. Among the Child People. Siddhartha went to the merchant Kamaswami. He was shown into a rich house. Servants led him over costly carpets to a room where he waited for the master of the house. Kamaswami walked in. A swift and supple man with strongly graying hair, with very clever and cautious eyes, with a covetous mouth. Host and guest exchanged friendly greetings. "I have been told," the merchant began, "that you are Brahmin, a scholar, but that you are seeking service with a merchant. Have you fallen on hard times, Brahmin, that you are looking for service?" "No," said Siddhartha, "I have not fallen on hard times, and have never experienced hard times. You see, I come from the Samanas, with whom I have lived for a long time." "If you come from the Samanas, how could you not be experiencing hard times? Are not the Samanas completely without property?" "I own no property," said Siddhartha, "if that is what you mean. True, I possess nothing, but that is voluntary, so I am not experiencing hard times." "But what do you wish to live on if you have no property?" "I have never thought about it, sir. I have no property for over 3 years, and have never thought about what I am to live on." "Then you have lived from other people's property?" "Presumably, but after all, the merchant also lives off the goods of others." "Well put. But the merchant does not take from others for free. He gives them wares in exchange." "That seems to be the way of the world. Everyone takes, everyone gives. That is life." "But permit me, if you have no property, what can you give?" "Each person gives what he has. The warrior gives strength. The merchant gives merchandise. The teacher, teaching. The farmer, rice. The fisherman, fish." "Very good. And what is it that you have to give? What is it that you have learned how to do?" "I can think. I can wait. I can fast." "That is all?" "I believe it is all." "And what use is it? For example, fasting. What good does it do?" "It is very good, sir. If a person has nothing to eat, then fasting is the wisest thing he can do. If, for instance, Siddhartha had not learned how to fast, he would have to accept any service today, whether with you or someone else, for hunger would force him to do so. But now Siddhartha can calmly wait. He knows no impatience. He knows no plight. He can stave off hunger for a good long time, and he can laugh at it. That, sir, is what fasting is good for." "You are right, Samana. Wait a moment." Kamaswami left and came back with a scroll which he handed to his guest, asking him, "Can you read this?" Siddhartha peered at the scroll, on which a bill of sale was written, and he started to read the text aloud. "Excellent," said Kamaswami, "and would you write something on this sheet?" He handed him the sheet and a pen, and Siddhartha wrote and returned the sheet. Kamaswami read, "Writing is good, thinking is better, cleverness is good, patience is better." "You can write marvelously," the merchant lauded him. "We have a lot to talk about. For today, please be my guest. Reside in this house." Siddhartha thanked him and accepted the invitation, and now he lived in the merchant's home. Clothes were brought to him and shoes, and a servant prepared his daily bath. Twice a day, a copious meal was served, but Siddhartha ate only once a day, and he ate no meat and drank no wine. Kamaswami told him about his business. He showed him wares and warehouses, showed him accounts. Siddhartha learned a lot of new things. He heard much and said little. And mindful of Kamala's words, he never submitted to the merchant. He forced him to treat Siddhartha as his peer, indeed, more than his peer. Kamaswami conducted his business with care and often with passion, But Siddhartha treated it all as a game, whose rules he strove to learn precisely, but whose content did not touch his heart. Not long after settling in Kamaswami's home, Siddhartha was already taking part in his host's transactions, but every day at the hour that she set, he visited beautiful Kamala. He wore lovely clothes, fine shoes, and soon he also bought her gifts. Her clever red lips taught him a lot. Her tender, supple hand taught him a lot. In regard to love, he was still a boy, and he tended to plunge into pleasure blindly, endlessly, insatiably. So she thoroughly taught him that one cannot take pleasure without giving pleasure, and that every gesture, every caress, every touch, every glance, every body has its secret, which brings happiness to the person who knows how to wake it. She taught him that after a celebration of love, the lovers should not part without admiring each other, without being conquered or having conquered, so that neither is bleak or glutted or has the bad feeling of having misused or been misused. He spent wonderful hours with the clever and beautiful artist, became her pupil, her lover, her friend. Here with Kamala lay the value and purpose of his current life, and not with Kamaswami's business. The merchant entrusted him with writing important letters and contracts, and got into the habit of conferring with him on all important matters. He soon saw that Siddhartha understood little about rice and wood, about shipping and dealing, but that he had a lucky touch, and that Siddhartha surpassed him, the merchant, in calm and serenity, and in the art of listening to others, engaging them deeply. "This Brahmin," he said to a friend, "is not a real merchant, and will never become one. His soul is never passionate about business, but he has the secret of those people to whom success comes on its own, whether because of a lucky star, or because of magic, or because of something he learned from the Samanas. He always seems to be only playing at business. It never fully becomes part of him. It never dominates him. He never feels failures. He is never bothered by a loss." The friend advised the merchant, "Give him 1/3 of the profit on business that he conducts for you, but dock him 1/3 of any loss. That will make him more eager." Kamaswami followed the advice, but Siddhartha was unruffled. If he made a profit, he was indifferent. If he suffered a loss, he would laugh and say, "Oh, look, this deal has turned out badly." He truly seemed indifferent to business. Once he traveled to a village to purchase a larger rice crop, but by the time he arrived, the rice had already been sold to another merchant. Nevertheless, Siddhartha spent several days in that village, regaling the farmers, giving their children copper coins, attending a wedding, and he came home from his trip extremely content. Kamaswami rebuked him for not returning immediately, for squandering time and money. Siddhartha replied, "Stop scolding, dear friend. Scolding has never achieved anything. If there has been a loss, then let me bear the burden. I'm very content with this trip. I have met all sorts of people. A Brahmin has become my friend. Children have ridden on my lap. Farmers have shown me their fields. No one took me for a merchant." "That is all very nice," Kamaswami cried indignantly. "But I should think you really are a merchant, or did you travel purely for your pleasure?" "Certainly," laughed Siddhartha. "Certainly. I traveled for my pleasure. For what else? I became acquainted with people and places. I enjoyed trust and friendliness. I found friendship. Now, dear friend, if I were Kamaswami, then the instant I saw that my purchase was thwarted, I would have angrily hastened back, and time and money would indeed have been lost. But instead, I had good days, I learned things, I experienced joy, I harmed neither myself nor others with anger or haste, and if I ever go there again, perhaps to buy a later harvest, or for whatever purpose, friendly people will give me a friendly and cheerful welcome. and I will pat myself on the back for not having shown haste or anger. So, let it be, my friend, and do not hurt yourself by scolding. If the day comes when you see that Siddhartha causes you harm, then say the word, and Siddhartha will go his way. But until then, let us be content with each other." Futile were the merchant's efforts to convince Siddhartha to eat Kamaswami's bread. Siddhartha ate his own bread, or rather, they both ate the bread of others, the bread of all. Siddhartha never had an ear for Kamaswami's worries, and Kamaswami had a lot of worries. If a transaction was threatened by failure, if a shipment of wares seemed lost, if a debtor appeared unable to pay, Kamaswami would never convince his colleague that it was useful to waste words of grief or anger, or to have furrows on his forehead, to sleep badly. Once, when Kamaswami reproached him, saying that he, Siddhartha, had learned everything from the merchant, Siddhartha replied, "Do not try to get the best of me with such jokes. From you, I have learned the price of a basket of fish, the interest that can be charged for a loan. Those are your fields of knowledge. But you did not teach me how to think, dear Kamaswami. You would do better to learn it from me." And indeed, his soul was not with business. Business was good enough to bring him money for Kamala, and it brought in far more than he needed. Otherwise, Siddhartha's sympathy and curiosity lay only with the people whose dealings, handicrafts, anxieties, diversions, and follies had once been as far from him and as foreign to him as the moon. But easily as he managed to speak to everyone, live with everyone, learn from everyone, he nevertheless remained aware that something separated him from them. And what separated them was that he had been a Samana. He saw the people living in a childlike and animal fashion, which he both loved and despised. He saw them struggling, saw them suffering, saw them turning gray about things that struck him as not worth the price, about money, about petty pleasures, petty honors. He saw them scolding and insulting one another. He saw them lamenting about pains that the Samana smiles at, and suffering from deprivations that the Samana never feels. He was open to anything these people brought him. The dealer, peddling linen, was welcome. The indebted man, seeking a loan, was welcome. The beggar who spent an hour telling him the story of his poverty was welcome, although he was not half as poor as any Samana. He treated the rich foreign dealer no differently than the servant who shaved him, or the street peddler who cheated him of pennies when selling him bananas. If Kamaswami came to complain about his worries or reproach him in regard to a transaction, Siddhartha listened, curious and cheerful, was amazed at him, tried to understand him, let him be right, as much as seemed crucial, and then Siddhartha turned away from him to the next person who desired him. And many people came to him, many to trade with him, many to cheat him, many to sound him out, many to arouse his pity, many to hear his advice. He advised, he sympathized, he gave, he let himself be cheated a bit, and this whole game and the passion with which all people played it occupied his mind as much as the gods and Brahma had once occupied it. At times he heard deep in his breast a soft and dying voice that admonished softly, lamented softly, barely audible. Then for an hour he was aware that he was leading a strange life, that he was doing all sorts of things that were merely a game, that he was cheerful, granted and sometimes felt joy, but that real life was flowing past him and not touching him. Like a juggler juggling his balls, he played with his business, with the people around him, watched them, enjoyed them. But he never participated with his heart, with the wellspring of his being. The wellspring ran somewhere as if far from him, ran and ran, invisible, having nothing to do with his life. And sometimes he was startled by such thoughts and wished that it could be granted to him to participate with passion and with all his heart in the childlike doings of the day, to live really, to act really, to enjoy really, and to live really instead of merely standing on the side as a spectator. But he always went back to beautiful Kamala, learned the art of love, practiced the cult of pleasure, in which more than anything else, giving and taking become one. He chatted with her, learned from her, gave her advice, got her advice. She understood him better than Govinda had understood him. She was more similar to Siddhartha. Once he said to her, "You are like me. You are different from most people. You are Kamala, nothing else. And inside you there is a stillness, a sanctuary that you can enter at any time and be at home in, just as I can inside myself. Few people have that, and yet all people could have it." "Not all people are clever," said Kamala. "No," said Siddhartha, "that is not the reason. Kamaswami is just as clever as I, and yet he has no inner sanctuary. Others have one, even though they have the minds of little children. Most people, Kamala, are like a falling leaf that wafts and drifts through the air and twists and tumbles to the ground. Others, however, few, are like stars. They have a fixed course. No wind reaches them. They have their law and their course inside them. Among all scholars and Samanas, of whom I knew many, one of them was perfect in that respect. I can never forget him. He was Gautama, the Sublime One, the proclaimer of that teaching. 1,000 disciples hear his teaching every day, follow his rules every hour, but all of them are falling leaves. They have no law and no teaching within them." Kamala looked at him and smiled. "You are talking about him again," she said. "You have Samana thoughts again." Siddhartha was silent, and they played the game of love, one of the 30 or 40 different games that Kamala knew. Her body was as pliant as a jaguar, and as a hunter's bow. The man who learned love from her was an expert in many pleasures, many secrets. She played with Siddhartha for a long time, lured him, rebuffed him, forced him, clasped him, delighted in his mastery, until he was vanquished and rested, exhausted at her side. The Hitira leaned over him, peered and peered into his face, into his weary eyes. "You are the best lover," she said pensively, "that I have ever known. You are stronger than others, more supple, more willing. You have learned my art well, Siddhartha. Some day, when I am older, I want to have your child. And yet, my dear, you have remained a Samana. You do not love me. You love no one. Is that not so?" "It may be so," said Siddhartha wearily. "I am like you. You do not love either. How else could you practice love as an art? Perhaps people like us cannot love. The child people can. That is their secret."